SUA alien woman Colonel shoved the human at muster. His Death World kill record silenced the deck. Why would a single record change the atmosphere of an entire deck? And what could be written in that record to leave everyone speechless? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. We are excited to have you here for another unforgettable science fiction adventure. If you enjoy cinematic stories filled with mystery, courage, and inspiring human moments, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Thank you for spending your time with us and for supporting the channel through every view, every comment, and every visit. Before we begin, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching this video from, and what time is it there right now? Now, let us begin the story. I have learned that the quietest soldier in the formation is often carrying the heaviest story. The muster deck of the Alliance battlecruiser Resolute stretched nearly 400 feet beneath a vaulted ceiling of reinforced alloy, its polished metal floor reflecting endless rows of disciplined personnel standing beneath cold white illumination. Massive observation windows revealed an ocean of stars drifting silently beyond the armored hull, while the steady vibration of fusion engines pulsed gently through every section of the ship. Thousands of officers and enlisted crew members stood in perfect formation as the morning readiness inspection began exactly on schedule. Precision mattered aboard the Resolute. Every uniform rested flawlessly against every shoulder. Every insignia reflected years of earned service. Every movement followed regulations older than some civilizations. At the front of the enormous assembly stood Colonel Nisra Kale, her sapphire blue skin glowing beneath the overhead lights, her silver ceremonial armor carrying the dark blue insignia of Fleet Command across one shoulder. She possessed the calm confidence of someone who had commanded warships through impossible situations and survived every one of them. Her violet eyes slowly examined each formation with practiced precision, searching for the smallest sign of disorder. She expected excellence because excellence kept crews alive. Her gaze finally settled near the rear of the multinational detachment assigned to the latest frontier expedition. One figure immediately drew her attention. Logan Hayes stood nearly motionless among representatives from 12 different worlds. Unlike many around him, he wore no polished ceremonial armor. His charcoal gray Earth expeditionary uniform appeared simple, almost plain beside the elaborate military attire surrounding him. Short blonde hair framed a weathered face marked more by quiet experience than dramatic heroism. His gray eyes remained fixed straight ahead, calm and unreadable. There was nothing impressive about his appearance unless someone bothered to look twice. Nisra slowly walked down the inspection line. Boots echoed rhythmically across the metal deck, while complete silence followed every step. She stopped directly before Logan and studied his insignia. Earth Expeditionary Corps. Minimal decorations. No obvious command markings. She tilted her head slightly. Human, she said evenly. Logan answered without moving. Colonel. Her eyes narrowed just enough to reveal mild disappointment. Your people always insist that surviving a death world makes you exceptional. Logan remained perfectly still. No, Colonel. She folded her arms. No. Surviving only means we are still learning. Several nearby officers exchanged curious glances. The response contained neither arrogance nor apology. Nisra took one deliberate step closer before placing one hand firmly against Logan's shoulder and guiding him a single pace out of formation. The movement was controlled, professional, and unmistakably public. Every nearby soldier noticed. The vast deck grew even quieter. Then perhaps, she said calmly enough for the surrounding ranks to hear, Earth should spend more time learning military discipline instead of telling stories about dangerous worlds. Logan adjusted his footing without resistance and immediately returned to attention. He did not argue. He did not defend himself. He simply corrected his position and waited for the inspection to continue. That silence unsettled several experienced officers far more than any angry response would have. Nisra watched him for another moment, expecting even the smallest hint of wounded pride. She found none. Before she could continue down the line, a fleet operations lieutenant hurried across the deck carrying a secured command tablet glowing with crimson authorization seals. He stopped beside the colonel and saluted crisply. Apologies for the interruption, Colonel. Fleet Command has transmitted an updated personnel verification package. They require immediate confirmation before departure. Nisra accepted the tablet without concern. Personnel updates happened every day. She activated the encrypted roster and casually selected Logan Hayes from the formation list. The screen paused for an unusually long second before displaying a single flashing notice across the polished command interface. Classified combat registry detected. Fleet command authorization required. The notification remained suspended above the command tablet, glowing with a steady crimson light that immediately caught the attention of every nearby officer. Classified combat registry was not a designation normally seen during an ordinary personnel inspection. Colonel Nisra Kale accepted the tablet from the Fleet Operations Lieutenant without allowing the slightest change in her expression. Years of command had taught her that unusual information deserved calm, not excitement. Around them, the thousands of crew members on the muster deck remained perfectly still beneath the brilliant white lights. Yet the silence had become noticeably heavier. Logan Hayes still stood exactly where she had repositioned him. His posture had not changed. His breathing remained slow and even. He neither looked toward the command tablet nor attempted to explain the warning now floating above it. That restraint intrigued Nisra far more than the security notice itself. She placed her hand against the authorization panel. Fleet Command recognized her identity instantly. One layer of encryption disappeared. A second followed. Then a third. Finally, the system paused again before displaying another request across the screen. Fleet Commander priority verification required. Nisra raised one elegant eyebrow. Very few service records required authorization beyond a ship's commanding officer. She accepted the additional verification transmitted automatically from Fleet Headquarters. The crimson warning dissolved into a dark interface bordered by silver lines. At the top of the display appeared a single heading: Death World Combat Registry. Several officers standing nearest the colonel quietly exchanged uncertain glances. Every member civilization understood what the word Death World represented. It described planets where survival itself demanded extraordinary endurance. Missions conducted on such worlds carried unusually high operational risk. Yet the registry beneath Logan's name looked nothing like an ordinary military record. Nisra expected columns describing engagements, campaigns, tactical victories, or command citations. Instead, she found a long chronological list identified only by operation numbers. Every line ended with the same brief notation: confirmed survival extraction. She frowned. Extraction? She murmured quietly. The Fleet Operations Lieutenant leaned closer to examine the display. There are no enemy classifications. Nisra continued scrolling. Operation after operation appeared identical. Different locations. Different environmental hazards. Different mission durations. Every entry concluded not with conquered territory or defeated opponents, but with verified personnel returned safely. Logan remained silent while the officers studied the record. Finally, Nisra looked directly at him. "Why are there no combat details?" Logan answered calmly. "Those reports belong to the people who needed them. Your registry lists no confirmed victories." The missions were not measured that way. She studied him for another long moment before returning to the display. At the bottom of the registry, another encrypted section waited beneath Fleet Command Authority. Unlike the previous layers, this one displayed an unusual warning: interpretive guidance required before release. The Fleet Lieutenant quietly swallowed. "I have never seen that instruction before." Neither had Nisra. She accepted the final authorization. The display brightened briefly before replacing every operation number with detailed mission summaries. The surrounding officers instinctively leaned forward. The first report appeared: Frontier Colony Evacuation. Environmental threat neutralized. Personnel recovered, 112. The second: Research Outpost Rescue. Personnel recovered, 43. The third: Civilian Transport Assistance. Personnel recovered, 206. Report after report followed the same pattern. The registry was not counting lives taken. It was counting lives brought home alive after impossible Death World deployments. The word kill suddenly carried an entirely different meaning inside the Earth Expeditionary Corps classification system. Before anyone spoke, the battlecruiser's overhead speakers interrupted the silence with a calm announcement from the ship's central intelligence. Fleet departure sequence delayed. Unexpected systems irregularity detected in primary navigation synchronization. Engineering assessment requested immediately. Logan slowly lifted his eyes toward the ceiling as though listening to something beyond the automated announcement. His calm expression changed almost imperceptibly. "That timing is unfortunate," he said softly. For reasons she could not yet explain, Nisra believed him. The announcement echoed across every compartment of the battlecruiser with calm mechanical precision, but the effect on the crew was immediate. Thousands of officers remained standing at attention, while maintenance teams hurried toward the engineering decks beneath the vast muster platform. The deep vibration of the fusion engines changed ever so slightly, almost too subtly for most species to notice. Almost. Logan Hayes lifted his head just enough to listen. Colonel Nisra Kale watched him instead of the engineering reports scrolling across her command tablet. "You heard something," she said quietly. Logan answered without taking his eyes from the towering ceiling supports above them. "Not exactly." "Then what?" Something stopped. The answer puzzled her. Around them, the engines continued producing their steady rhythmic pulse, and the artificial intelligence immediately reassured the crew that propulsion remained stable. Every visible indicator displayed normal operation. Yet Logan's attention remained fixed on the faint mechanical rhythm passing through the deck beneath their boots. Nisra activated a direct channel to engineering. "Status report." Chief Engineer Talvin responded almost immediately. "Navigation synchronization temporarily lost alignment with the inertial reference grid. We are still diagnosing the source." "Mechanical failure?" "Unknown." "Damage?" "None detected." Logan listened quietly before speaking. "May I ask a question?" Nisra looked toward him with cautious curiosity. "Go ahead." "Did every system report the problem at exactly the same moment?" Talvin hesitated. The sound of rapidly moving technicians echoed behind him before he answered. "Yes." Logan slowly nodded to himself. "Then it probably did not begin where the warning appeared." Several nearby officers exchanged uncertain looks. Nisra folded her arms. "Explain." Logan finally looked directly at her. "Machines usually report the first place they notice a problem." He paused. "Not the first place the problem actually started." Before Nisra could respond, another notification appeared across the command displays suspended above the muster deck. "Internal drone inspections completed. No anomalies detected." Logan quietly exhaled. "That does not help." Nisra noticed the change in his expression. "Why?" "Because if every inspection agrees perfectly during an unexpected failure, either everything is truly fine." He let the sentence hang for a moment. "Or everyone is looking in the same wrong direction." Those words lingered in the cold air of the immense deck. Nisra had commanded starships for nearly 2 decades. She had trusted artificial intelligence because it consistently outperformed instinct in measurable situations. Yet today's classified registry had already challenged several assumptions she considered unquestionable. She opened a private communication channel to Chief Engineer Talvin. "Suspend automated inspection teams." A brief silence followed. "Colonel, send actual engineers." "Manual inspection?" "Immediately." The engineer sounded surprised but obeyed without hesitation. Minutes later, live holographic feeds appeared above the deck as engineering crews moved through maintenance corridors carrying handheld diagnostic equipment instead of autonomous drones. Logan quietly observed every camera angle. Most corridors appeared perfectly ordinary. Endless conduits, cool white lighting, polished alloy surfaces. Then one image caused him to narrow his eyes. "Stop that feed." The technician controlling the display immediately froze the image. It showed an unremarkable access junction beside a gravimetric stabilizer assembly. Nisra stepped closer. "What do you see?" Logan pointed toward a thin maintenance cable attached along the wall. "Nothing." She looked at him in confusion. "Exactly," he continued calmly. "Every cable nearby is vibrating slightly because of engine harmonics." His finger remained fixed on one narrow section. "That one is completely still." The engineering officer enlarged the image dramatically. Even under magnification, the difference remained almost impossible to notice, but once seen it could not be ignored. Chief Engineer Talvin's voice returned through the communication network. "Colonel, he is correct. That conduit should be vibrating with the rest of the structure." The engineer nearest the junction carefully removed a maintenance panel. Seconds later, his surprised voice echoed across the deck. "Found it. A synchronization coupler has partially disengaged." The drones never identified it because the unit still reported normal output. Throughout the massive battlecruiser, the subtle engine rhythm immediately returned to perfect balance. Logan quietly lowered his hand. Nisra looked at him with an expression that no longer contained skepticism. It contained something far rarer. Respect beginning before understanding. The gentle vibration flowing through the deck settled into a smooth, familiar rhythm once the synchronization coupler had been secured. Around the immense muster hall, officers quietly exchanged relieved glances while engineering teams confirmed that every propulsion system had returned to perfect alignment. The battlecruiser Resolute was once again ready for departure. To most of the crew, the incident appeared to be nothing more than a minor technical delay. To Colonel Nisra Kale, it raised a far more important question. She dismissed the formation and instructed every division to resume normal duties. Within minutes, the vast deck emptied, leaving only a handful of senior officers reviewing the final engineering reports. Logan Hayes remained exactly where he had been standing, waiting without impatience or expectation. Nisra approached him slowly, the polished metal floor reflecting the silver edges of her ceremonial armor beneath the bright overhead lights. "Walk with me," she said. Logan nodded once. Together they crossed the quiet observation corridor overlooking the ship's central reactor chamber. Beneath the transparent floor panels, enormous magnetic containment rings surrounded the glowing fusion core, while countless maintenance drones moved with silent precision through narrow service passages. For several moments, neither of them spoke. The silence felt different now. It no longer carried judgment. It carried curiosity. Nisra finally broke it. "How did you notice something that every automated inspection missed?" Logan rested one hand lightly against the observation railing. "I did not notice more than the system." He looked down toward the reactor below. "I noticed something different." She folded her arms. "Explain." "The engines had a rhythm when I boarded the ship." His voice remained calm and measured. When the announcement came, the vibration changed before the warning reached the speakers. Nisra frowned thoughtfully. "Our sensors recorded the fault immediately." Logan smiled faintly. Immediately after the fault became measurable. He gently tapped the railing with one finger. Small changes often happen long before machines decide they are important. Those words reminded Nisra of the classified registry she had opened only minutes earlier. Every mission in Logan's record had followed the same pattern. Problems identified early. People brought home safely. Quiet decisions that prevented larger disasters. She activated the command tablet again and reopened the combat registry summaries. This time she read them more carefully. Hidden inside every operation was the same sequence. Environmental instability noticed. Civilian evacuation initiated. Team extraction completed. Mission concluded. There were remarkably few references to enemy engagement at all. Instead, the reports focused almost entirely on anticipation, preparation, and survival. "Your registry still confuses me," she admitted. Logan looked toward the stars beyond the reinforced observation windows. "Most people expect a kill record to count victories. Does yours not? Not the way Fleet Command describes it." She turned the display toward him. "Then tell me what I am actually reading." Logan studied the familiar reports before answering quietly. "Every death world has something trying to end your mission." He paused for a moment. "Sometimes it is wildlife. Sometimes weather. Sometimes the environment itself." His gray eyes reflected distant starlight. "The record measures how many lethal situations were successfully ended before they claimed another life." Nisra slowly lowered the tablet. The meaning settled into place with surprising clarity. Earth had never celebrated destruction. It had simply used different language than the rest of the galaxy. Before she could ask another question, the ship's central intelligence interrupted every communication channel with a calm announcement. "Attention, senior officers. Fleet Command has completed full review of Expeditionary Specialist Logan Hayes. Updated operational advisory now available." A secure notification appeared across Nisra's command display. She opened it immediately. Instead of another combat report, only one sentence appeared beneath Fleet Headquarters authorization. "Personnel assigned alongside Specialist Hayes demonstrate a statistically significant increase in mission survival probability." For the first time since the morning inspection began, Colonel Nisra Kale understood that the most valuable number inside Logan's entire record had never been how many dangers he had faced. It was how many people consistently made it home because he had been there. The message from Fleet Headquarters remained suspended above Nisra's command tablet long after the notification tone had faded. Personnel assigned alongside Specialist Logan Hayes demonstrate a statistically significant increase in mission survival probability. It was one of the shortest personnel evaluations she had ever read, yet perhaps the most meaningful. Numbers could be manipulated. Awards could be influenced. Titles could be inherited. Survival rates rarely lied. Nisra slowly locked the tablet and continued walking beside Logan through the observation gallery that overlooked the immense central hangar. Below them, engineering crews prepared support craft for the Resolute's departure, while cargo teams guided supply containers across magnetic transport rails with practiced efficiency. Every technician moved with quiet purpose. Every assignment depended on someone else completing theirs. Logan paused briefly beside the transparent wall, overlooking the activity below. He watched a maintenance crew adjusting a docking arm, while another team verified pressure seals before a shuttle launch. "Good crew," he said softly. Nisra followed his gaze. "You can tell from this distance?" Logan nodded. "Nobody is rushing." She looked puzzled. "Should they be?" "Not before launch." He smiled faintly. "People who hurry usually miss something earlier." The sentence lingered in her thoughts as they entered the command strategy room. Holographic maps floated above a circular conference table where senior officers had already gathered for the expedition briefing. Captain Dorrell, Chief Engineer Varek, Medical Director Celis, and several division commanders looked toward the colonel as she entered. Their expressions shifted almost immediately when they noticed Logan walking beside her rather than standing outside the meeting. Captain Dorrell activated the operational display. "Colonel, engineering has confirmed all navigation systems are functioning normally." Varek nodded. "The synchronization issue has been completely resolved." Nisra acknowledged the report before asking a different question. "How long would it have taken automated diagnostics to identify the loose coupler if we had departed on schedule?" The room grew noticeably quieter. Varek consulted his engineering estimates. Approximately 3 additional hours. And if the alignment continued drifting during those 3 hours? The engineer hesitated before answering honestly. Navigation efficiency would gradually decrease. Fuel consumption would increase. Long-range jump calculations would become less reliable. He paused before adding, "Nothing catastrophic, just increasingly difficult to diagnose." Logan quietly observed the conversation without interruption. Nisra noticed that he only spoke when he believed his words would genuinely help. She found that restraint surprisingly rare. Captain Dorrell looked toward the human. "Specialist Hayes." Logan met his eyes. "Captain, Fleet Headquarters attached an unusual recommendation to your transfer orders." Logan remained silent. The captain continued reading directly from the display. "Operational commanders are encouraged to seek your situational assessment before high-risk deployments involving unpredictable environmental conditions." Several officers exchanged surprised glances. Such recommendations were almost never included in personnel files. Nisra looked toward Logan with renewed curiosity. "Do you know why they wrote that?" Logan answered after a thoughtful pause. "Probably because I ask inconvenient questions." A few officers smiled politely. Nisra did not. She sensed there was more behind the answer. Such as, Logan looked around the conference table before replying. What changed that nobody noticed? Which assumption has everyone accepted without checking? Who has stopped asking for help? The room became completely still. Those were not tactical questions. They were human ones. Before anyone could continue the discussion, a communications officer entered carrying a newly received transmission crystal marked with Fleet Command Priority Authorization. He placed it carefully on the conference table. "Colonel, this arrived moments ago from Expeditionary Command." Nisra activated the message. Instead of strategic orders, a single recommendation appeared across the holographic display. Before evaluating Specialist Hayes by his record, observe how the people around him behave. His greatest qualification has never been written inside any file. Every officer slowly turned toward Logan. He looked almost embarrassed by the attention. Then, without saying a word, he quietly moved toward the refreshment station and began helping a young communications technician gather several data pads that had accidentally slipped from her overloaded arms. No announcement followed. No audience applauded. He simply noticed someone carrying too much and chose to make the load a little lighter. For For the first time that day, every senior officer in the room understood that Fleet Headquarters had been trying to teach them something no document could fully explain. The conference room gradually emptied as senior officers returned to their respective departments, but Colonel Nisra Kale remained standing beside the panoramic observation window overlooking the endless stars. The battlecruiser Resolute had resumed its departure preparations, and deep beneath the armored decks the fusion engines now pulsed with the steady confidence she expected from one of the fleet's finest vessels. Yet her attention remained fixed on something far less mechanical. Logan Hayes stood quietly near the rear of the room, helping the communications technician organize the final stack of mission tablets before returning every device to its proper location. He performed the simple task with the same careful focus he had shown while identifying the synchronization failure. There was no difference in his attitude whether the responsibility involved saving a ship or helping someone carry equipment. When the young technician thanked him, Logan only smiled politely and wished her good luck on the deployment. He asked for nothing in return. Nisra finally approached him once the room had become almost silent. "Specialist Hayes." Logan turned calmly. "Colonel." She studied him for several seconds before speaking. "Earlier today, I judged you before I understood you." Logan answered with his usual quiet expression. "That happens sometimes." She folded her hands behind her back. Most officers would have reminded everyone after proving they were right. That would not have repaired the ship. His answer came so naturally that it almost sounded obvious. The mission matters more than winning an argument. Those words remained with her as they stepped into the long observation corridor stretching toward the bridge. Beyond the transparent alloy walls, distant stars drifted slowly across the darkness, while maintenance vessels maneuvered around the Resolute with elegant precision. The artificial gravity generated a faint vibration beneath their boots, smooth and reassuring after the earlier repair. Nisra looked toward the endless stars before asking the question she had been considering since reading his registry. "Your record speaks constantly about survival." Logan nodded once. "Yes. How does someone learn to think that way?" He remained silent for several moments before answering. "On a death world, nature teaches you something very early." She waited patiently. "You survive longer when everyone watches out for one another." His gray eyes reflected the pale blue light from the distant nebula outside the window. Eventually, that lesson becomes more important than survival itself. She considered those words carefully. Across many civilizations, strength was often measured by individual achievement. Earth appeared to measure it differently. Before the conversation could continue, the ship's central intelligence projected a soft notification throughout the corridor. "Expedition launch authorization approved. All departments report mission readiness. Boarding sequence begins in 15 minutes. Officers throughout the nearby decks immediately resumed purposeful movement as final preparations accelerated. Logan quietly stepped aside to allow a maintenance crew pushing diagnostic equipment to pass through the corridor before continuing toward the embarkation lift. Again, he noticed others before himself. Nisra watched the small gesture with growing understanding. Fleet Headquarters had been correct. The most valuable quality inside his personnel file could never be summarized by statistics or classified reports. It revealed itself only through ordinary moments. As they reached the embarkation platform, Captain Dorrell approached, carrying the finalized expedition roster. He paused beside the colonel before speaking. "All assignments confirmed." Nisra accepted the roster, then looked at Logan's name one final time. Beneath his position, Fleet Headquarters had quietly added a note that had not existed earlier that morning. "Advisory status, Team Stability Asset." She closed the display without saying anything. The title sounded almost insignificant compared to military honors, yet after everything she had witnessed that day, she suspected it might be one of the highest compliments any commander could receive. And for the first time since Logan Hayes stepped onto her ship, Colonel Nisra Kale no longer saw a soldier from a dangerous death world. She saw the kind of teammate every crew quietly hoped would be standing beside them when the mission became more difficult than anyone expected. The Resolute slipped away from the orbital dock with barely a whisper, its enormous engines bending space so smoothly that the stars outside the observation ports seemed to stretch into glowing ribbons before settling back into perfect stillness. Across the bridge, holographic navigation charts floated above polished command stations, while officers quietly monitored every phase of the long-range expedition. Nothing about the departure suggested urgency. Every indicator remained deep within operational limits. Yet Logan Hayes stood near the tactical observation console with the same calm attention he had shown throughout the previous day. He was not studying the displays. He was watching the people operating them. Colonel Nisra Kale noticed immediately. She approached without interrupting the bridge crew. "Something concerns you," Logan answered softly. "Not yet. You expect it will?" He considered the question for a moment. Long missions reveal habits before they reveal problems. Nisra looked around the bridge. Every officer appeared disciplined, experienced, and completely focused. "What habits?" Logan smiled faintly. "The ones nobody notices because they happen every day." Before she could ask another question, the Central Intelligence projected the expedition status across the bridge. All systems nominal. Estimated arrival at Frontier Sector, 48 hours. Crew readiness, excellent. Psychological cohesion, stable. Captain Dorrell nodded with satisfaction. A textbook departure. Logan quietly agreed. It should stay that way. Several hours later, the ship settled into cruise velocity. Daily routines replaced launch preparations. Engineers rotated through maintenance inspections. Pilots reviewed emergency procedures. Medical teams completed wellness evaluations, and supply officers verified inventories. Everything followed established protocol with practiced efficiency. During an afternoon inspection of the habitat ring, Nisra invited Logan to accompany her without making the request sound official. They walked through bright corridors where crew members exchanged greetings while maintenance personnel serviced environmental systems hidden behind polished access panels. Logan acknowledged nearly everyone with the same quiet respect regardless of rank. He thanked a sanitation technician for keeping the passageway spotless. He held a service hatch open while two engineers carried diagnostic equipment through a narrow doorway. He paused briefly to ask a junior communications officer whether her first deployment was going well. Every interaction lasted only seconds, yet every crew member smiled after speaking with him. Nisra observed the pattern without commenting. Eventually she asked, "Do you know all of them?" Logan shook his head. "Not yet." "Then why remember to ask about their work?" He looked through a nearby observation window where distant stars drifted across the darkness beyond the hull. "Because people usually notice when someone only speaks to them after something goes wrong." The answer settled quietly between them. Before Nisra could respond, an engineering apprentice hurried around the corner carrying a stack of maintenance modules almost too large to see over. One container slipped slightly, forcing the young technician to stop awkwardly in the middle of the corridor. Logan immediately stepped forward, lifted two of the heavier modules with effortless care, and walked beside the apprentice toward the service bay without making the moment feel unusual. When they returned several minutes later, the apprentice thanked him with visible relief. Logan simply wished the young engineer a successful shift and continued walking. Nisra watched the apprentice disappear before speaking again. "Your registry never mentioned moments like that." Logan smiled. "Those moments are not why anyone joins the service." "Perhaps they should be." He looked at her with quiet surprise. She realized she genuinely meant the words. At that exact moment, the bridge communicator chimed softly throughout the corridor. "Attention senior staff," the calm voice of the Central Intelligence announced. "Fleet Headquarters has transmitted supplementary historical records regarding Expeditionary Specialist Hayes. Authorization granted for command review." Nisra opened the secure transmission while they continued walking. Instead of tactical reports, dozens of personal commendations appeared, each written not by admirals or generals, but by engineers, medics, shuttle pilots, rescue volunteers, mechanics, and ordinary crew members. Nearly every message ended with a different version of the same simple sentence. "I made it home because he stayed until everyone else did." Nisra slowly lowered the display. She finally understood why Fleet Command considered Logan's record extraordinary. The most remarkable victories inside it had never belonged to battlefields at all. They belonged to the ordinary people who were still alive to write those words. The bridge grew quieter after the historical commendations were reviewed, but the silence no longer felt uncertain. It carried a different kind of respect, one earned gradually rather than demanded by rank. Colonel Nisra Kale returned to her command station while the Resolute continued its steady passage through deep space. Beyond the forward observation canopy, distant stars shimmered across an endless black horizon, interrupted only by the soft blue glow of the ship's navigation field. Every system remained stable. Every department reported normal operations. Yet something aboard the battlecruiser had undeniably changed. Officers who had barely acknowledged Logan Hayes during the morning inspection now greeted him with genuine warmth as they crossed the corridors. Engineers invited him to review maintenance plans before beginning difficult repairs. Junior crew members quietly asked questions about surviving harsh environments, expecting stories about impossible battles. Logan usually disappointed those expectations with a gentle smile. Instead of speaking about danger, he talked about preparation. Instead of describing victories, he described teamwork. During the evening command briefing, Captain Dorrell projected the next phase of the expedition across the central holographic table. Their destination lay near a remote frontier system where several scientific outposts operated among unstable planetary conditions. Environmental uncertainty remained unusually high, although no immediate emergency existed. The captain reviewed supply schedules before turning toward Logan. Specialist Hayes, Fleet Headquarters attached additional guidance to this assignment. Logan nodded politely. Yes, Captain. They recommend including your observations during every environmental assessment. Logan looked almost uncomfortable with the attention. I am only one member of the team. Captain Dorrell smiled. Apparently, a valuable one. Nisra quietly watched the exchange. Earlier that day, she might have interpreted Logan's modesty as careful diplomacy. She understood now that it was simply genuine. He never attempted to become the center of attention because he had spent most of his career making certain someone else survive long enough to stand there instead. After the briefing concluded, Nisra asked Logan to accompany her to the upper observation gallery overlooking the entire command deck. From there, they could see hundreds of officers performing their duties beneath layers of floating holographic displays, while the gentle pulse of the fusion engines echoed through the ship like a steady heartbeat. May I ask you something personal? She said. Logan leaned lightly against the observation rail. Of course. When people read your record, they expect to meet a legendary soldier. He laughed quietly. That usually leads to disappointment. Why? Because they imagine extraordinary people. He looked down toward the busy bridge below. Most missions are completed by ordinary people who refuse to quit on each other. Nisra remained silent for several moments. Then why did Fleet Headquarters preserve every one of those commendations? Logan answered without hesitation. To remind future commanders what success really looks like. Before she could respond, the ship's central intelligence issued a routine operational update. Frontier sensor relay established. External environmental scans complete. No immediate hazards detected. The announcement sounded reassuring, yet Logan continued watching the tactical display instead of the stars. Nisra noticed immediately. You see something? He slowly shook his head. Not yet. Then what are you looking for? The first small thing that does not belong. His answer felt strangely familiar. It echoed everything she had learned since meeting him. Great failures rarely appeared without warning. They usually whispered before they shouted. As if answering that thought, a young navigation officer quietly approached the command console with an uncertain expression. Colonel, she said respectfully, there is probably nothing important, but one of the long-range environmental sensors has begun recalibrating more often than expected. Every diagnostic says it is functioning normally. Nisra looked first at the report, then at Logan. He did not rush toward the console. He did not claim certainty. He simply asked one calm question. When did it begin? The officer checked the timestamp before answering. Approximately 11 minutes ago. Logan nodded thoughtfully. Then perhaps this is the right moment to start paying attention before everyone else decides there is finally something worth noticing. The bridge settled into complete concentration after Logan's quiet suggestion. Nobody sounded an alarm. Nobody rushed through the corridors. Instead, the crew of the Resolute did something far more valuable. They began paying attention before the situation demanded it. Colonel Nisra Kale instructed every department to verify the long-range sensor network through direct observation in addition to automated diagnostics. Engineering teams inspected calibration relays by hand. Navigation officers compared independent readings instead of relying upon synchronized displays alone. Within 20 minutes, the answer quietly emerged. A microscopic layer of crystalline particles drifting through the frontier sector had begun interfering with one narrow spectrum of environmental sensors. The interference was far too small to trigger fault warnings, yet if left unnoticed during the coming planetary survey, it could have produced increasingly inaccurate environmental projections across the expedition. Chief Engineer Varek looked up from the final report with visible relief. If we had continued another 12 hours without recalibrating, our landing models would have slowly diverged from actual surface conditions. Captain Dorell nodded thoughtfully. Nothing catastrophic. Varek smiled. Because we noticed it while it was still small. Across the bridge, several officers instinctively looked toward Logan. He simply thanked the engineering teams for their careful work before returning his attention to the observation window. Once again, he behaved as though the solution belonged to everyone rather than himself. Later that evening, after every recalibration had been completed and the expedition officially resumed, Colonel Nisarakail requested one final gathering on the muster deck where the story had begun. Thousands of officers and crew members assembled beneath the same brilliant white lights reflecting across the polished alloy floor. The great observation windows once again revealed endless stars beyond the hull, but the atmosphere felt profoundly different from the morning Logan Hayes first stood among them. Nisara walked to the center of the formation and paused before speaking. "Yesterday," she said calmly, "I believed experience could be measured by uniforms, decorations, and assumptions." Her violet eyes moved across the assembled crew before resting on Logan. "Today I learned that wisdom often arrives wearing none of those things." The deck remained completely silent. She stepped toward Logan until they stood only a few feet apart. Many remembered the moment she had publicly moved him out of formation during the first inspection. This time she raised her hand slowly, not to correct him, but to offer the formal fleet salute reserved for those whose service had earned unquestioned professional respect. Every officer on the deck immediately followed her example. Thousands of hands rose together in perfect unison. Logan returned the salute with the same quiet dignity he had shown since boarding the Resolute. There was no triumph in his expression, only gratitude. When the ceremony ended, the crew quietly returned to their assignments. Engineers walked beside pilots. Medical officers shared elevators with maintenance technicians. Senior commanders thanked junior specialists whose careful work often passed unnoticed. The atmosphere aboard the ship had changed in a way no official regulation could have required. Weeks later, Fleet Headquarters archived the expedition report. The section describing the sensor recalibration occupied only a few lines. The summary regarding Logan Hayes contained only one sentence. His greatest contribution was not identifying danger. It was teaching an entire crew to notice small responsibilities before they became large emergencies. Colonel Nisara read that final report alone beneath the soft lights of her ready room before looking through the observation window toward the distant stars. She finally understood why Earth's Death World record had never been about counting destruction. It measured every moment when someone chose preparation over pride, teamwork over recognition, and responsibility over reputation. Somewhere beyond the endless darkness, the small blue world continued its quiet journey through the galaxy, carrying people who had learned through hardship that strength alone could keep someone alive, but character was what brought everyone home. And as the Resolute disappeared deeper into the frontier, no one aboard remembered the morning because a human had been pushed out of formation. They remembered it because one quiet human had gently moved an entire crew toward becoming better than they had been the day before.